Yeah. I would go back to the dream sequences being cut in a way that makes you wonder what is real and what isn't as another modernist thing. Most films up until this point, when they included a dream sequence, they were doing something different with the lens and with the edit. But here, not only does he not do any different editing techniques or filming techniques with the dream sequences, he adds the dream sequences in throughout the entire film. So you could draw a line from Buñuel in this movie specifically to something like Mulholland Drive, where it's like, we never know what is real and what isn't real.
Yeah.
Is this Buñuel's best film? Maybe not. But I think here he goes all in with that merging of reality and dream, which will inspire people like Lynch and others to do the same.
That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, the editing is really crucial because that's still the way that we communicate dreams in film. In these couple of decades, these guys were sort of developing a language that we're still using today. It's interesting too because it's an outgrowth of the language that the silent films and stuff used, and Ancien Andalou was like a big landmark of sort of dream cinema. It's kind of crazy that like someone who was there at the beginning is sort of putting something like a final stamp on what film language is, at least till up to today, you know?
Yeah, no, that's right. Belle de Jour.
Belle de Jour. Luis Buñuel.
Buñuel returns to Europe, huh?
Yes. Yeah, after a long sojourn in Mexico, he came back, he made some French films, some Spanish films, and he's gonna basically finish out the career in France. And you might want to go to the film experts for your opinions about smut like this. No, not really. This film isn't that crazy. But some like it unauthorized. And I'm Jay Brooks Young.
I'm Zach Domes.
I think I want to say it was a Roger Ebert quote where he said, like, you actually won't see any more sex in this than you would see in the Doris Day romantic comedy of the current moment, which is pretty much right. Like, there's a lot of stuff about sex, but they're not depicting actual sex scenes in this, and there's not a lot of nudity. Like, it's obvious that Catherine Deneuve made it a stipulation that she didn't want to get nude, you know? So that makes it an interesting film, given what it's about.
Right, there's a lot of innuendos and a lot of references, but not depictions. Like it starts off, like right from the beginning, it starts off with a kind of shocking scene. Going in, if you don't know anything about it, you will be sort of on the edge of your seat as to what the hell's going on in the first 3 minutes. And so he does that. He cuts in these various shocking moments.
These fantasies.
Yeah.
That she's having. Yeah.
Yeah. And it creates a tension for sure without ever exposing very much. And in some way, Buñuel and other directors, what they can do without crossing certain lines or boundaries that the film world always upheld for so long. I've always appreciated that going back through old films. Like, some films have really pushed a boundary, and even seemingly crossed boundaries, but not technically. And so I've loved to, for that reason, I love watching movies like this.
Yeah, we're still like walking up to the edge, where it's going to be acceptable to some extent to just show as much nudity as you want, simulate all kinds of sex scenes and just go all out. We were not there yet, but he's pushing it as far as it can go while still maintaining some kind of boundary.
Mm-hmm.
For that reason, it is a pretty kind of groundbreaking film, it feels like, or it's just, it's pushing the envelope a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels very much centered in this male perspective. And you've got Buñuel and his writing partner kind of at the helm. So it's like, yeah, it's focused on a woman's sexuality and trying to give you this idea of like these sort of taboo fantasies that might not be touched on in other films, other media, but that's filtered through this male gaze and this like very male conception of that. So it feels kind of old-fashioned and kind of skeevy and like, I don't know, I felt at a remove from the film for that reason, I think. Yeah.
Well, it also seems like Buñuel's direction is, it seems like he's directing his characters, especially, or his actors, especially Severine's character, to be kind of blank, to be kind of emotionless to a certain degree. There's also like that level of it where not only is it old-fashioned in some sense, Buñuel is older now. You know, he's not a young director anymore. So there's that. But then it's just, yeah, all of the characters feel a little removed or a little blank. And I'm guessing that's intentional, to create a kind of mystery, ambiguity. You know, you don't know what's fantasy and what's not. So it starts to blend. There's these dream-like details that are incorporated. There's cattle and the sound of bells and the sound of cats. And it should signify when a dream or a fantasy is occurring, but it sort of becomes ambiguous and blends. I liked that part of it. I will say that, like, despite it having these kind of qualities to it, whether it's old-fashioned or flat, it did feel very dreamlike. It did feel very, like, surreal. Like, it's typical of Buñuel, very surreal.
Yeah.
And that's always fun.
Yeah, that's terrific. And he's always made that a part of almost any of his films.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the storyline, it's this wife who has, right from the very beginning, a fantasy that she is not disclosing to her husband. So there's already this tension and something that the audience knows that one of the main characters doesn't know. And then she's gets a kind of a tip to go check this brothel out, of which she might work at, which is very, very unusual, right? This is like a strange predicament most people wouldn't find themselves in. You're married to a man and you're just going to go work at a brothel for the hell of it. And so that already the premise and the whole, set and setting and everything is strange. And then to just add surreal elements on top of that, you've got yourself a very oddball film. Yeah.
Yeah. You've got these sort of unconscious urges and feelings bubbling up, and we're seeing those sort of literally depicted. And then she is also seeming to act unconsciously as well. Mm-hmm. And there's, I think when she first goes to the brothel, there's a wonderful shot that's just of her feet, like going up the stairs. And then it shows her hand, like buzzing the buzzer, almost saying like there's some invisible force sort of moving her, that she doesn't have the control of this action that she's taking.
Well, sometimes that's a really good point, and it makes me think of how sometimes in those moments there's a cut to a past scene, like something from her past, like when she was a child, and it's like a quick little snippet of some memory, usually with an older man. And so, yeah, it is unconscious, this behavior, but because he's adding in those brief moments from her past, you can infer that unconscious behavior is coming from something that she went through when she was younger.
Yes, there's that as well. A little bit of a kind of Freudian suggestion there. Mm-hmm. But it's very, it's not super explicit.
No.
It's just a little bit of an impression, to the point where you could almost imagine that those are fantasies themselves, that they're not necessarily actual memories.
Yeah. And then, the sort of rabbit hole, Pandora's box there, is that what it really is the difference on some level between memories and fantasies and dreams. Like, it can all start to blend in certain moments and in certain ways. So it becomes impressionistic. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's some beautiful like outdoor location stuff in the countryside, and also some stuff on Paris streets. But indoors, the sets feel very kind of artificial. They're very minimal. It reminded me of some of these later Dreyer films where he's just like puts a couple little pieces, a couple elements in the rooms just to give you an idea of like what these people's lives are like, but they don't look like actual lived-in spaces. They look more like a set on a theater or something. So that adds something kind of strange and unreal about this, you know? Like, when she's in these bedrooms with the clients, it kind of feels like we're watching something on a stage a little bit. The way that these sets don't read as totally real places.
I love that. I mean, it isn't, what's the word, liminal. Like, they're not liminal spaces necessarily, but it gives that feeling of liminality. It's like, it reminds you of places you've been, but it doesn't seem to be, it's something's out of place, which is like a dream. Like, it has the familiarity to it, but it isn't, there's something off. There's always kind of something off. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's also a lot of the indoor spaces are of the brothel, and this particular brothel is like a high-end brothel where it feels like a nice apartment of some kind, you know?
Yeah.
I can't think of another film that would depict such an environment or know of such places at the time that existed.
Yeah, I only think of other kind of theatrical films, like the stuff I've seen of Fassbinder's films, Pedro Almodovar or something. But yeah, it's almost like she doesn't know. If this was like a fantasy, she wouldn't necessarily know what the inside of a brothel looks like, and she's kind of just imagining like what an apartment would be as a brothel, sort of.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It does feel like all of these choices Buñuel has made with the idea of just making this feel like you never know if it's real or not.
Yeah, I mean, but that is Buñuel. He began as that with
it was Ancien Andalou.
Yeah.
First, and then L'Age d'Or.
Yeah, the age of gold. He and Dali are asked all the time what their films mean, and even from that very beginning of the surrealist movement, they claim that they don't know, and that it's a lot of this stuff just comes from dreams and comes from intuition and spontaneity and all these things. I think Buñuel said something like, when it had to do with like the ending of this movie, I'm sure he said this other times too, but specifically when asked about the ending of this movie, he said something like, I'm not interested in knowing what the end is about either. Like, I don't care. Like, there's something so extreme about the surrealist artists where they've taken themselves out of it completely. Like, something in them, something stirred in them to make a decision on set somehow. And they said, let's put this here, and then they edited the film. At least they had some direction there. And they said, do this and then that and do this. And then when the whole product's said and done and you ask a question about it, they go, I don't know. I don't care. That is so counterintuitive. And it's such the opposite of most other artists who seem so intentional and ready to reflect and ready to, go on about what it might mean to them now and what they were intending to do. So it's this kind of rebellion against that, I think.
Yeah. And that will frustrate a lot of people because it feels like the work is unfinished or something, or it's unconsidered, like the author's supposed to bring you a certain idea, and like the author is supposed to have a sort of final vision and idea in mind. And I think it will feel to people sometimes like that means he's just throwing stuff at the wall, and there's not necessarily a point to it. But I don't know, that like it is purposeful in the sense that we can't fully understand like what everything means to us, why it makes us feel a certain way, why we react to things. Like we can intellectualize, but we can't really find the truth. There's no way to sort of pull out like an explanation, just like a logic to these feelings. So I mean, someone like Buñuel wants to just put this stuff on the canvas and say, this makes me feel a certain type of way, and it probably makes you feel a certain type of way, and let's just think about that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the conclusion is, but like, isn't it interesting that like we don't have a way to make sense of this? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think I said something like this about one of his earlier films, that in doing that sort of thing, it frustrates some people because it, you know, certain people want the lines to be filled in, right? Like you sit down, you tell a kid, okay, draw within these lines, and some kids behave perfectly accordingly, and they start drawing that crayon within those lines, but some kids don't obey to those rules, and they start drawing outside of the lines. They draw whatever they want, and once you draw outside the lines, well, then you can draw anything. You know, it's like if you're drawing inside the lines, it's a certain way. So you can watch a movie that is very formal and perfectly, you know, tied together, and it is what it is. And then there's films like these that are like, there's no lines. So it's limitless in that way. It's frustrating to some people because it's limitless, but then it's super exciting to a whole other group of people because it can be a new watch every time. You can imagine like a seemingly infinite number of possibilities of what any various scene means, and not only that, but it's different for each person. Like the more surreal it is, the more like outside of the lines it is. It's literally like every person can have a different take, and that's the case with any art. But this is particularly more the case. Where you're really leaving it up to the viewer to make up whatever they want.
Yeah, and I still don't know how to feel about it. What did I actually make of it?
Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know.
I guess I should ask: Have you seen any later Buñuels yet?
No, nothing past this.
Yeah, so I've seen the secret charm of the bourgeoisie. The discreet charm of the bourgeoisie, the secret charm. We really don't know what the charm is. And I will say that it gets weird. He starts to, at this age, I think, become even more relaxed about what anything really means. He gets very loose. I think, in my opinion, I'll say it this way. If you're not sure what to think about this, you will not have the easiest time knowing what knowing what to feel about the discreet charm. It gets very, very wacky, but wacky in a way that is it's just hard to pin down, I would say. We recently watched and talked about not Beau is Afraid, but Eddington. And it's something kind of like that. We were like, wow, it was good. Like it felt like it went by faster than the runtime. I'm speaking of the movie we're talking about now and Eddington. Both of them felt like they were quick. They were like interesting and exciting and wild and kind of doing new things here and there. But in the end, not knowing exactly how to feel about it, feeling sort of ambiguous and a mixture of like, wow, it was beautiful, but also what the hell was that?
Yeah.
The cinematographer was Vierny. Is that how you would say his name? Sasha?
Yeah.
So he did Hiroshima, Mon Amour, and Last Year at Marienbad. He teams up with Buñuel here, and one thing you can say about it, no doubt is it's beautiful. It's another great movie by that guy. I feel like that cinematographer he's very clean and just like kind of perfect with his shots. There's no, I wouldn't say that it's necessarily groundbreaking, but it's like dialed in.
Yeah. There's something very workman-like about it. I at least like the lighting and stuff. It's not super like expressionist, I would say. And it's interesting. I think this is Buñuel's first color film as well. It feels like we've crossed the point where color is becoming the dominant mode in cinema all over the world. And I think that was due to just like the cost going down, the processing becoming easier, and color television coming into being adopted in places like the US. So it was thought of as like what people wanted, I guess. Maybe that was true, maybe that wasn't, but now we're deciding this is just what films are going to look like, you know? So it's like, in a way, we've arrived at what like European art film is going to look like for a majority of them. They're going to look like this film, you know, or they're going to look like Le Samurai, which comes out the same year, which is interesting, especially when you have a director who's worked as long as this. Like there's a continuity. It's obviously very different being in color, but I don't know. To my mind, it does kind of look the same as those older films, just because that lighting is somewhat flat and I don't know.
Yeah, now at this point too, choosing black and white will be like a very intentional thing.
Yeah.
You know? Like I feel like early 60s, if you did color, it was because you finally got the budget to be able to do that. And it's like you could do it finally. Whereas now it's going to become much more easy. So it's going to become an intentional decision to do black and white. One film I can think of where I know that was the case was Scorsese's wrestling film. What the hell is that called?
Raging Bull?
Yeah, with Raging Bull.
Boxing.
That's a very intentional decision. And it was one where people were a little confused because Hollywood hadn't really done a big budget kind of action-packed movie like that. That was in black and white for a long time.
Yeah. That is him wanting to recall stuff like Rocco and his brothers, you know, kind of neo-realist and noir stuff. But this just feels sort of like contemporary. That's like an interesting way to think of it, because it's now a very old film, almost like 60 years old, this film. But there's something about it being in color that makes it feel firmly set in a time close to ours, I think.
Yeah. And I would go back to the dream sequences being cut in a way that makes you wonder what is real and what isn't, as another modernist thing too. So it has to be the case that most films up until this point, when they included a dream sequence, they were doing something different with the lens and with the edit, for the most part. I'm sure you have some films that were doing different things, but here, not only does he not do any different, editing techniques or filming techniques with the dream sequences, he adds the dream sequences in throughout the entire film. So you could draw a line from Buñuel in this movie specifically to something like Mulholland Drive, where it's like we never know what is real and what isn't real. And I say that because it's on the one hand, it's color. It feels like it's dialed in. It's cleanly shot. And then it's also like there's dream sequences, and they're just as clean. And it's like a non-linear dreams. Like you go from like when she's the same age as she is now to when she's younger, back to like another sexual fantasy, back to like a different shot, all while also seemingly continuing this kind of, brothel adventure. But then the way it ends kind of like leaves it ambiguous as to what was even real, if that whole thing was even real, right? So yeah, I see Mulholland Drive as a major, Lynch had to have been inspired by this. Obviously, he was inspired by Buñuel, as are many people.
Yeah.
Is this
That makes sense.
is this Buñuel's best film? Maybe not. But I think here he goes all in with that merging of reality and dream, with this kind of reckless directing that he's known for, which will inspire people like Lynch and others to do the same. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it's part of a sort of a trend, and you can go back to some of the Hitchcocks like Vertigo. Will give you a sort of dreamlike feeling. Something like Antonioni's Red Desert also does that, and I'm thinking specifically about color films that do this. And yeah, that editing is really crucial because that's still the way that we communicate dreams in film. So it's like in these couple of decades, these guys were sort of developing a language that was very effective that we're still using today. And it's interesting too, because that feels like it's an outgrowth of the language that the silent films and stuff used, and Ancien Andalou was like a big landmark of sort of dream cinema. So it's kind of crazy that like someone who was there at the beginning is sort of putting something like a final stamp on what film language is, at least till up to today, you know?
Yeah. No, that's right. That's right. Yeah, the silent era toward the end of it began to really experiment with that type of thing. Vampire, I think of Vampire as a kind of, ambiguous film with what is dream and what isn't, and
Murnau's Sunrise. It's a little dreamlike sometimes.
Oh, and Phantom Carriage is also very strange. But they were, or even what's the Dr. Caligari.
Yeah,
they started to get wild, and then sound was invented, and they had to dial it back.
Yeah. I forget if it was Schrader who talked about the sort of delineation of World War II that like is not like a very clean analogy about film, but like it talked about the sort of literal mode of film that you had pre-World War II, and then post-World War II things could become more artful and more sort of, I don't know, up for interpretation, that you could break the sort of time continuity, these things.
Yeah, I think I remember somebody saying that German Expressionism came about because Germany was going through, the rebuilding after World War I. So the collective psyche was fractured, and so German Expressionism reflects that in some sense. But also Buñuel with L'Age de
Door.
L'Age de Door. L'Age de Door.
Just L'Age d'Or.
L'Age d'Or.
Like the Palme d'Or.
His major, at least it seems to me, his major like reaction in artistically is the Catholic Church. At least that's who for sure gets so super upset by his films. And I'm thinking about how, so there's a lot of people who want to go in line. Right? Like there's these artists, they love film, they want to make films, and so they do it. And they're told, you can make whatever films you want to make, but just make sure you don't like upset the Pope, and you don't upset like, your major audience and the bourgeoisie and stuff. And Buñuel is the guy who's kind of like the rebel. He's the one that says, oh, who can't I upset? Okay, cool. That's what I'm going to do. It's like, it's a motive for sure. Like that's,
Yeah.
You have these dreams, and your dreams don't go in line with what the Father is telling you how you should behave. And then there's these artists that are like, yeah, but the dream is just a dream. Like, it's okay. I'm not going to act in accordance with that dream. But I had the dream. It's beyond me. It's way beyond me. Like, I don't even know what it is, but it's interesting. And I don't understand why that has to be censored just because it doesn't go in line with whatever your agenda is and your rules are. So Buñuel, he he makes these films that upset people and they get censored, and he never quits. He's like, that's just what he loves to do.
Yeah, until culture seemed to catch up with him, you know?
Right.
Like he kind of lived to see those things become acceptable in some form.
Right. So then
I think of that anecdote, whether it's apocryphal or not, that he would like carry rocks in his pockets when they were showing those first films on Chien and Belle de Jour, that like if someone tried to like bum rush the projector and like stop them from projecting the film, he was gonna like fight. He was gonna like throw rocks at people and like try to fight to let this stuff be shown, you know.
That's amazing. Yeah, culture catches up, and when culture catches up, then you start reacting to the culture itself. I mean, if you're somebody who's like made art in reaction to some force that, you know, would get upset at you not staying within their rule book, and then they change, or they get old, like the Catholics lose power. Culture starts to like, you know, make the Catholics have less meaning in general. They still have tons of power and all that stuff, but they've lost a bit at this point. But the bourgeoisie and the culture at large, now suddenly they have more say, they have more power. And yeah, I don't know, as an artist who's always trying to like push boundaries, that's kind of where you would go next. You'd push boundaries to those who think they're cool and who think they know things. And are for sure, you know, especially the upper class, they are hypocritical in certain ways. And Buñuel points that out, you know, in his other films that we watched.
Yeah, and like Puritan and restrictive, you know. Yeah, and it does feel like with this film he wants to say like there's no limit, there's no like fence on where the mind can go or what it's possible for us to desire. But there's a friction where we must pretend because of social norms that those things are at all possible for us to imagine. We have to totally be quiet about them. And then that becomes like debilitating in a case like this.
Mm-hmm. We imagine that like living that certain way is for other people. Or like you can imagine that, you know, the upper class is like, oh, that's not the way I would live. And so it's for other people, you know, I don't belong there.
Yeah, there's when the madam has her watch through the peephole when one of the other mistresses is like dominating that one client, and Deneuve's character says something like, I can't believe people would stoop to such depravity. And it's like, that's such an interesting thing for her to say, having, you know, arrived at this point where she's, you know, clandestinely working in this brothel. But like, is this something that just doesn't appeal to her? So it's like suddenly the repulsion kind of comes back, or is she just sort of like, it's just like a knee jerk, like learned reaction of like, oh yeah, people aren't supposed to like share this, or, you know, this is socially taboo, you know?
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's interesting. It seems that there's still sort of like a push-pull inside of her.
Yeah. And I would have liked to see more in that case, because you could read it if there was more there to read. I think you could do it. That you could do this, but it's possible you could read it as like the woman that is, I guess, beating that guy. Right? She. It's a power game that they're playing, and she's the one in control. And I think that woman is lower class, I would assume. And it's even mentioned like multiple times. This protagonist has a nice coat. She comes from a higher class household. So the other two women are lower class, and yet in this particular scene, she has the control over this higher class gentleman. And so when she's looking through the peephole, it's not just any old woman who's looking through the peephole. It's a higher class woman looking through at a lower class woman having control over a higher class gentleman. So there's this whole possible power struggle there between classes. So she could look at that and say, oh, I'm not into that. And, subconsciously it's because she feels threatened in some sense.
That's interesting. Yeah.
That's not the kind of game she wants to play. For her, as far as we know, she wants it to go the opposite way, right? She wants to be the one being controlled.
Yeah, and that gets complicated, right, with the entrance of the Spaniard and his young friend in like the second half of the film.
Right.
And this young man becomes like obsessed with her and wants a relationship outside of the walls of the brothel. And she's really like taken with him, but it feels like she wants to flirt with that idea, but she does not want that to actually be made real. And we're also like seeing these scenes where she's now happier with her husband, at least some of the time. She seems to be in a better mood with him. So like, again, yeah, it's a little repulsive maybe for the idea of the fantasy becoming real. And of course, when that sort of does happen, it's like catastrophe at the end, and he shoots her husband, and then gets like, does he get shot down in the street?
Yeah,
he does, right?
He gets shot in the street. She looks down, which is well shot. That's a well shot scene right there. She looks down and she sees people running, and then sees her husband on the ground, and you don't know if he's dead or not. He might as well be. But no, he survives. He just survives by being paralyzed and in a coma. But
the young man gets killed by the police.
That's right. The young man gets shot by police. Yeah. So that fantasy.
It looks like the street at the end of Breathless.
It does.
It kind of seems like an overt reference to it.
It does. Yeah.
Which is fun.
He was quite a villain too, by the way. He played a villainous character really well.
Oh my God. I couldn't handle how much she was into him, because I just thought he was so weird and ridiculous.
Yeah. But it's something along the lines of like, I don't know, fantasy doesn't make sense, Like there's something irrational about it.
Yeah. It does, in almost in a Lynchian way. Buñuel seems to be leaning into the sort of melodrama at the end there. And I think he described the novel that this film was adapted from as being very soap opera. So he seems to just be going, we'll take it all the way. This can be her fantasy of some crazy soap opera thing happening.
Yeah. Yeah. One way you could read the ending then is you could say, okay, well, this whole thing actually happened, right? She actually did. She did go to the brothel and she did experience all that stuff. And she was going to tell her husband, but he gets shot and all these things. And so in the end, when she hears that ringing bell and the cattle and all that stuff, which would signal, right, the dreams that she has had throughout the film, and he wakes up. So now you could read that as something like, now that her husband is in a coma, and this fantasy life that she lived out really did live out, when it merged into her real life and caused trauma and disaster, now that her husband's in this coma, now her fantasy is that he is he's alive again, or he's like well and like tending to her, and he's himself again. That's sort of it's such a dark ending, actually. That her fantasy now would be he's alive and he's the same guy as he was before and tending to her in the same way. Yeah,
kind of like, that's almost like the main character in a straitjacket in a padded room at the end sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And does she say something like the dreams have stopped to him when he gets up, or to someone?
Oh, God.
I noted that down.
Yeah, the dreams from before have stopped, but now she has new dreams. Is how you would have to look at that, yeah. At the same time, the whole thing may be fantasy, and so we just don't know. You're left to wonder.
Yeah, you get that double image of the apartment building, and then the like trees on top of it, the forest, and it's just the two universes are right on top of each other. They exist in the same space. We talked a lot about the dreamlike stuff, but also in pushing these boundaries of depicting female sexuality, I also thought about Jane Campion, who, right, at least with her films, you can say, well, those come from a woman's perspective, a female gaze. So there's something that feels truer about that. But she feels like someone who is influenced, if not by Buñuel, then by the filmmakers that came after him that sort of took up this mantle of very boldly depicting sexuality, and especially women's sexuality. And her films are always thorny because they always deal with like this attraction to men and to danger and to things that it seems like you shouldn't be attracted to, you know. And they've always received a lot of criticism, but they've always pushed that envelope, and that's something about her films that I really appreciate.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good connection there. I was thinking of, I think this has probably been noted, but Eyes Wide Shut. Did you see that?
Yes. I definitely thought of that when she goes to the like rich villa and pretends to be dead in a coffin. Yeah.
Just like the whole double life thing, and
the sort of the fantasies of the rich.
And then when you try to live that other life, it's impossible to keep them separate. You probably could feel like you're able to in the beginning, but at some point you're one person. So, those two lives you're living are going to eventually start messing with you and start intertwining. And both these movies do that.
And Tom Cruise acts a little out there the same way that the young man is acting very over the top. Pierre Clemente.
Yeah. Yeah, he is over the top.
He shows up in The Leopard. I don't remember him in The Leopard.
I don't remember that either. But I was thinking of Buñuel directing this villain character to be that way. There was a part of me that was like, oh my God, this guy is horrible. And it reminded me of Buñuel's villain that he creates in is it The Damned? Is that what the movie's called?
Yeah, Los Olvidados.
Yeah.
Which I forget. It means English title is The Young and the Damned, but I think it translates as The Forgotten.
Well, it reminded me of his villain that he creates for that movie, and that was a chilling villain, and that was another dark movie. Yeah.
This film, I just like I do feel I had to remove from it, and I think I much appreciate his earlier 60s ones, The Exterminating Angel, and especially Viridiana, and the way that film ends just knocked me out. I think that's like one of the most amazing like last 30 minutes of any film.
Yeah.
And it there's a good mix there of the realism and this sort of fantasy kind of unexpected element.
Yeah.
Whereas this is fun, but it's kind of becomes all fantasy, and I think I just prefer that a little less,
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think I agree, and I would say the same thing about not knowing exactly what to feel about it yet. It needs more reflection. But one thing that we could say for sure is that Buñuel, with each film that he creates, there's more inspiration to draw from for these later directors that will come onto the scene, and that's always something fascinating about certain directors, where they're like it. Whether or not it's a hit or a miss, every film that they create provides more to draw from, which is a kind of an amazing thing, especially when you're like older at this point and you're still creating stuff that's like, going to be inspiring to a whole number of people. So, yeah.
Yeah, he was older. Apparently he was becoming deaf, or like partially deaf around this time as well. Deneuve talked about that later on, and she also makes the 1970 film Tristana with him. But that, yeah, it would seem that he was losing his hearing, and French wasn't his original language, so that complicated him being able to understand things as well. And it's incredible that he's still, even as he's slowing down here, making such, evocative and inspirational, interesting films.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he's going to go on to make at least 3 more that I know of. The Discreet Charm, and then there's 2 other ones that he does. So it's almost like he feels like he's at the end here, and he needs to, the end of his career at least, and he needs to double down and start creating stuff. And what he makes is endlessly fascinating, whether or not it all comes together in any one project to be like one that you would suggest. I mean, he has so many different films. So would you start with this film? No, not necessarily. But if you're a lover of Buñuel and surrealism and that kind of thing, yeah, I'd say add it to your list if you hadn't seen it.
Yeah. This film, for some reason, is his most seen on Letterboxd. I can't really come up with an explanation why. Maybe it's just the Catherine Deneuve connection. I suppose she is a big star. I don't feel like I have context for it, but apparently, from doing those Jacques Demy musicals and probably other stuff, she became a very big deal. It's still crazy to see this over on Chien Andalou, over The Discreet Charm and all of those.
I mean, my best guess to that, too, is that a lot of people are reading the way that Séverine kind of goes to the brothel for her to live out her fantasies as a kind of liberating force versus any potential patriarchal, fantasies that Buñuel actually has at this point. I mean, it's ambiguous and we can't know for sure. I'm sure that there's things that Buñuel's putting in here that he's putting in here just because he fantasizes about them. But I think a lot of people are also seeing Séverine's character as, potentially bi. I saw some people mention that because she seems to have some kind of admiration for the leader of the brothel. And also she just seems to be, kind of exploring for the first time, allowing herself to go explore against her fears and anxieties. So I think a lot of people read that as liberating, but that's up to debate ultimately.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. I understand that how people can get that from this film.
Also, one other thing is that movies like this always seem to entice. The cover is the most revealing. The classic cover of her kind of turning from behind, topless, is that's the most revealing that character is the entire movie. So it's sort of designed to be provocative. Viridiana or the other one that you mentioned, or Olvidados, or any of those other ones, they don't have that same, I don't know,
lurid appeal.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and I don't know how directly you can tie that to the original producers, the Hakim brothers, but that was sort of their idea, I think, was we can sell this off of this being a sexy film starring Catherine Deneuve. They were very astute about producing and marketing films, it seemed. They were just like veterans of film production. They had produced a bunch of Jean Gabin films in the 30s, including Pepe Le Moco and one of our favorites, Le Jour se lève, Daybreak. But they produced Les Clis with Antonioni. They produced a couple of Claude Chabrol films and Roger Vadim, who was sort of known as being a sex-forward director, French director. So they were astute about what people wanted to see, and it sounded like the novel didn't have all of this sort of ambiguity and dreamlike stuff in it, but it's fun that they, gave Buñuel the space to make of it what he wanted to, and you get something much more interesting than, work-a-day director would give you probably from that material. So it's great what we got out of it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't, there's something Well, it reminds me of Godard's Contempt and that kind of,
Yes.
Here's a model, make a movie with this model. So he's like, okay.
Yeah, they might have actually produced that.
I was going to say I wouldn't be surprised if they had.
No, I want to double check. No, it doesn't seem so. But yeah, very much the same idea.
Yeah. Well, there you go. We did it.
Yeah,
we did it. We talked about the day beauty.
I feel like we were a little sleepy, a little dreamlike for this episode.
Yeah, there you go. But, that's the meta thing there. Yeah, it's a little dreary today, a little rainy here. It's a little smoky where you are. So, but that's what you get when it's unauthorized. That's what you get. Yeah, so that does that. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And what do we got next? We have
next week
Sergio Leone,
one of the greats. Once Upon a Time in the West.
Upon a Time in the West. It'll be your first time watching it. I've seen it once before. That'll be great. For any questions, comments, or info, go to unauthorizedpod.com. And till next time.
Till next time.